2011, and you may see some of the euphoria of yesterday evaporate slightly because the idea that, oh, this isn't as good as we thought it would be. If it stays muted, then I think the market will be very happy indeed with inflation coming down, and again, that would lead to more dollar weakness. So while yes, the dollar could rally in terms of the peak, you think certainly the near-term peak is definitely in for the moment.
But David, I mean, the reasons why it's still there, those spreads that still remain.
ต่อล่วงไป1,600 แล้วก็เด้งมา 1,700
One would argue.
โอเคตลาดดาวโจนส์บวก 1,200 โอเคเรามาดูตลาดไทยจะบวกกี่จุดนะยินดีกับคนที่รับเมื่อวานตอนเย็นนะน่าจะรวยเลยรวมทั้งผมด้วยรับมาเลยนี่จะขายให้หนักๆเลยกำไรชิบหาย
So you're seeing some of that unwound.
แล้ว
But as I said, today the inflation
สนุก
expectations.
แน่ๆวันนี้สนุกแน่ๆคนช็อตก็ช็อตต่อไปนะสู้ชีวิตเขาเรียกว่าช็อตสู้ชีวิตนะวันนี้ก็คัดหุ้นต่อไปนะครับแต่ว่าไม่น่าจะเหลือหุ้นอะไรให้ซื้อเท่าไหร่เอาจริงๆรอผลประกอบการออกมาแล้วก็ค่อยซื้อแล้วกันเพราะมันน่าจะร่วง
David, thank you so much.
ส่วนใหญ่ก็ขึ้นกันมาหมดแล้วตัวที่ยังไม่ขึ้นก็คือไม่มีเจ้ามือไงเพราะว่าเขาไม่กล้ากันแล้ว
So when you look at I don't know probability of inflation next year, you know that's
ไปมา
also this complicated bit. David, by the way, thank you so much. David Finnerty there. Live press out of Singapore. Yeah. So we're talking about this brewing perpetual bond story that's really rocking the market, right? So it stresses have emerged.
มาคัดหุ้นกันนะ
We've had these long held assumptions.
ผมก็ไม่รีบนะเอาจริงๆเหลือเงินสดซื้อเยอะแต่ว่าไม่รีบอะเอาจริงๆแค่นี้ก็สบายๆแล้วซื้อทุนต่ำได้ทุนต่ำเยอะมาก
How do we figure out which issuer is about to do what next? Let's bring in right now our senior Asia fixed income and credit strategist Timothy Tan. He's with us here in the studios. You've done a lot of research on this, so just take us through why some issuers are doing this. Let's start there.
It all boils down to cost. Now, when they issue the perp, they bought a call with it. Now, obviously, they're going to use the call if it makes sense to use the call. And with the rising rate environment and the rising credit spread environment, that likelihood is getting higher for obvious reasons. If you're going to roll over and the cost is going to be cheaper than issuing a new bond, well, what are you going to choose? You're obviously going to choose rollover. This has nothing to do with the credit question. This is a simple math question.
Right.
All right. Now, if you want to view it from that perspective, then yes, risk is rising, but it's not necessarily across the board. I think that's the key point here that I'm trying to point. That every perpetual issue is different. Some do not have a reset call, which means that your rates stay the same at infinitum. Some have a step up in the spreads in refixing. Some have a very big step up in refixing. And that will determine whether the issuer will call or not. So obviously, each issue has to be analyzed on an issue-by-issue basis, clearly. And the forecast of where you think spreads are going to be in the future will matter a lot.
What a wonderful way to raise money, then.
Yeah, it is.
It's fantastic.
Fantastic way.
You don't have to call it a liability necessarily. Okay, the bondholder has no vote. You just have to keep paying the principal, whatever, and there's no repayment.
Yeah, because the bondholders went in on a mistaken view.
โอ้โหตอนนี้เจ้ามือโหดเหี้ยมมาก
Now, if you go on the basis, yeah, in the last 10 years, bonds have been called because it got cheaper and cheaper to refinance.
ตัวเล็กตัวน้อยนี่เจ็บหนักนะเจ้ามือลากมาขายโหดจัด
What they're holding, the valuation is correct. And that's your thing.
Well, then how do you price them? And do you price along the criteria you mentioned? Because some of these things, I think what you're saying is, this shouldn't come really as any surprise.
No, it shouldn't.
I mean, these issuers were well within their right not to do it anyway.
Exactly. So this is something that I think the investors have the view that, it's a reputational reason. But frankly speaking, if you saw a call, you should expect at some point, if it makes sense,
แต่น้ำมันไม่ขึ้นนะ
not be used.
น้ำมันอยู่86เหรียญนะเวทเต็ดแต่ว่า
the credit issue is a separate issue, right?
แล้วแต่ตลาดเลยเพราะว่าเจ้ามือคุมหมดแล้ว
The credit perspective, if you have a distressed name, well, it doesn't really matter. They're not going to call, all right? But if you look at a single A name, for example, look at AIA. Okay, the bond that the chart that you showed just now had 3 bonds.
Right.
All right. One of which is Bangkok Bank, which is the biggest bank time. One of which is AIA, which is a very large insurer, which is single A rated. And the last one is New Development. Okay.
Yes.
Now, New Development is unique. It's a bond that doesn't punish the issuer for not calling. Literally, that coupon stays on forever.
Right, well, here's the other question, right? And I'll use the China property Evergrande analogy, right?
Yep.
Is this simply an Evergrande story? Is this going to be limited to a select number of issuers? Or do you see this more because rates are going up and more of these issuers do have these types of bonds?
Well, I think it's not so much a credit
ส
issue.
นุก
to be
แน่
fair.
วันนี้
Okay.
สนุก
I think
แน่
it is a
บอก
market
เลย
issue
สนุกแน่
where your cost of
ตลาด
refinancing
แรน
has
ดอ
gone
ม
up
แล้วนะ
because- be it most slightly because of credit spreads.
โอ้
not necessarily
เขียวกันส
because
ด
of
ใส
trading
โอ้ย
risks.
แต่ละตัวเขียวกันสดใส
Rising credit spreads means that if your reset spread is set too low relative to where the market is, there's no
เวียด
reason
นาม
for
ก็
the issuer to call.
Well, no,
ไม่ลง
No,
นะ
it's a no-brainer. And that is precisely the point I'm trying to make. It is
เวีย
not
ด
a
นาม
credit
บวก
issue, it's
บ
a
วกบ
mathematical
วก
issue.
คริ
And
ปโต
obviously, it's
บว
also
ก
a
บว
credit
ก
issue
บ
in the
ว
sense
ก
of where
ฟิว
market
เจอ
is
ร์
viewing
บวกบวก
each
บว
credit
ก
risk. It can apply for AIA. AIA's senior spread is 150 basis points, which was recently issued.
Yeah.
That call for the subordinated paper is only 170. So as the spread's going to go up, they're not going to call. Hence, you can see more price
โอ้
volatility in
โห
that bond.
กลับคืนกันมาหมดครับ ไม่มีใคร
Bank
กลัว
spread is at 460 the reset. And yet senior paper is on 170. That
โอ้
bond
โห
is unlikely to get called.
ใครรับ
That is the call.
187 เมื่อวานไปขาย
It's the other way around. So it really
192 นะ
depends
ส
on
ก
the issue.
สพกลายเป็นหุ้นปั่นไปแล้วครับ
Leo,
Leo.
Headlines with Korea. Are there parts of Asia that you think are seeing more stress than others now?
Well, I think that in Korea in particular, it's because of domestic credit crunch. I think Bloomberg's covered it pretty well. They continue to.
thank you.
They have been doing QE of corporate bonds. They have been relaxing regulations to try and keep the financial system afloat. It's not working very, very well at this point. All right. And given the inflation level and obviously the different rate differentials, they continue to raise rates. That's going to further exacerbate the credit situation onshore. Now, this refers specifically to bank paper. Now, bank paper is capital, is regulatory capital.
Okay.
If
How is that different in terms of how you would price that as against the corporate issues?
well, in terms of regulatory capital, they have special requirements to call them back. If they want to call them back, they must satisfy certain criteria that the regulators set out. Now, if your balance sheet deteriorates, that likelihood gets a lot smaller, the calling back of bonds. All right. Furthermore, regulators, especially global regulators in particular, have been telling banks if it's going to cost you more to refinance your AT1s, you don't call them back. Period. Australia has been pushing this. Europe has really pushed it, and they have really not called back quite as many times
Oh,
already. Asia is
bang
beginning
tap.
to see that
ถามจริง
trend. So, in that sense, AT1s or Tier 1 capital for banks will face greater hurdles for calling back the bonds vis-a-vis corporates.
The holders will see it coming, is what you're
So
saying.
yeah, they should see it coming back.
Wow.
Malaysia, they
Wow.
definitely see it coming. They still under the assumption that for reputational reasons they're going to call, but no, not these days. I think that's going to change dramatically. Yeah.
Wow.
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Really time there. Really good stuff. Thank you very much. Bloomberg Intelligence is senior Asia fixed income and credit strategist there. Just looking at what's going with the Korea board, it's extending its gains now against the dollar. We are now strengthening
ตลาดจีน
3%
บวก
thereabouts.
กระจายเลยต
Right,
ลาด
let's have a
จี
look
น
at the first word news. We've got Sam Bankman-Fried shutting
Okay.
down Alameda Research. Now, that is the trading house at the heart of his troubled digital asset empire. Of course, that's called FTX.com. Bankman-Fried has told investors that FTX may have to seek bankruptcy if it doesn't get a rescue, saying that FTX is spending the week doing everything they can to raise liquidity. Elon Musk telling Twitter staff that bankruptcy is a possibility, and that was in his first address to employees since that $44 billion takeover. Twitter has a significant debt burden from the acquisition. It's also seen a pullback from some advertisers as well. Bloomberg also learned that 2 senior executives have resigned. China bank loan growth expanding by the smallest amount in almost 5 years. It is being seen as the latest sign of an economic slowdown. New medium and long-term loans to companies also slowed sharply from September, signaling sluggish investment demand. We've also got aggregate financing at the lowest level for an October at least since 2019. Of course, we've got a housing market slump and COVID curves to thank for that. Imran Khan's supporters resuming a march to Islamabad to demand early general elections. The march is set off from the same place where Khan was shot a week before. And the former cricket star, who is still recuperating, will join the convoy once it is closer to the capital. He addressed his followers through a video message and gave an update about the attack on him. That is a look at the first word headlines. We've got plenty more on the way. This is new.
โอ้แต่ละตัวเขียวสดใสวันนี้เขียวสดใส
Energy is never created nor destroyed.
ยาวไปกราฟยาวไป
From coal to natural gas to hydrogen to whatever comes next. S&P Global Commodity Insights helps you turn change into opportunity.
Las nuevas energías están cambiando el mundo. Cambiemos juntos. GoTech
ใหม่ไฮยูรอนไอเซรั่มจาก L'Oréal Paris มาพร้อมแอปพลิเคเตอร์ลูกลิ้ง3โฮพิเศษมอบความรู้สึกเย็นทันทีที่ใช้ผิวรอบดวงตาดูเรียบเนียนรอยคล้ำดูลดลงใต้ตาดูกระชับอ่อนเยาว์ไฮยูรอนไอเซรั่มจาก L'Oréal Paris เพราะเราคู่ควร
Inflation and recession, an energy crisis intensified by war, and the aftermath of the pandemic. Next week, world leaders meet in Bali for the G20 summit, and Bloomberg is there bringing you the news and analysis.
A confluence of economic, climate, and security crisis make it a uniquely challenging time.
All of these are pointing towards a big slowdown in trade. It all starts next week, only on Bloomberg, your global news authority.
กองทุนตกล็อตอีกแล้วมั้งครับกองทุนตกล็อตซะแล้วนะครับกองทุนก็เป็นเครื่องมือให้รายใหญ่นะน่าจะใครไม่ต้องบอกที่สั่งกองทุนได้ซื้อแพงขายถูกกองทุนเท่านั้น
The next one to watch also Thailand here. So we are looking at right now the single biggest jump in Asian equity markets going back to March 17 of this year. So that's several months. It takes us back to levels of September 20. So does this continue? I mean, only time will tell. But we are getting better news as far as the Fed is concerned. Slightly better news as far as China's COVID is concerned. So you have two things the bulls can hang their hats on, as they say.
Have a good weekend.
Yeah, FTX reading things. Anyway. Okay, well, it's naturally going to be a topic of conversation and what happens in inflation and the like here as well, and how currencies have been hurt by the dollar, and this dollar move, of course, to the downside may well be helping them. It's going to be leaders and VIPs from APEX 21 economies will gather in Bangkok for the APEX summit. Executive Director Roberto Santamaria, what to expect in Bangkok next week.
This is a challenging time for all of us, not just APEC, not just for us in APEC. And the significance of this year's meeting is that this is the first time since 2018 that the leaders will be meeting in person. And the last they met was in Port Moresby in 2018. Much has changed since then. And the challenges, as you enumerated, are there. Those are real, but what's important is APEC as a platform, where you provide that opportunity for these leaders to meet, for these senior officials to meet, ministers to meet. And what we need more of now is the building of trust. We've seen this. This is the currency that we need right now. And really APEC provides that opportunity for us to do this in these very, very challenging times.
We've seen the war in Ukraine really splitting members of the G20, whether you talk about leaders or finance ministers.
ยาวไปนะแบงก์กรุงเทพยาวไป
division also taking place when
ยาว
it
ไป
comes to
มี
these
ต่ำไม่ขาย
conversations
มี
that
ต่ำ
we're
ไม่
looking
ขาย
ahead
แล้ว
to.
ยาวไป
It sounds like you're quite optimistic that you can get a level of cooperation that's going to be impactful.
โอเค
The level, the cooperation has always been there. Yes, we realize that there are issues, there are challenges, and these are not new to APEC. We've gone through crisis in the past, whether it was the Asian financial crisis.
โอ้โหทีเดียวเหรอ
Yes, and we've had
แม่เจ้าเหวย
we've lived through the U.S.
แต่ละ
China
ตัว
trade
แม่เจ้าเหวย
tensions.
เลยอ่ะ โอ้โห
The important thing is that we are able to bring the parties together, and because we're non-binding, we have that ability to have folks at the table discussing issues that matter to us. Yes, those conflicts are there, but there are also things that we need to work on together, and that's the value that these meetings have. You know, the fact that you can bring parties together, the fact that you can have them discussing these matters rather candidly, I must say. You know, in the ministers' meetings, nobody has held back. But what's important is that in spite of those challenges, they have managed to focus on work to get the business going. You know, and looking at structural reform, looking at matters the economy, looking at sustainable development, looking at inclusive development. These are strides that we've still been able to make despite those, you know, the background of the conflicts. The background is there, it's up, in fact, it's not background, it's up front. But in spite of that, we've managed to have conversations, and that's important.
แต่ละตั
And
ว
yet
ฮะ
somebody who
แต่ละ
will
ตัว
not be
ฮะ
at the table is President Biden. Does that concern you?
มันแน่นอนฮะ
You know, we've had situations in the past where leaders, for some reason, whether it's domestic or otherwise, have not been able to attend the APEC summits, but they've had representations. We've always had representations, whether it's in the form of the vice president, vice prime ministers, ministers. We've always had high-level representation.
And that was the APEC Executive Director, Rebecca Santamaria. Speaking of high-level participation, next week is certainly going to be quite busy, not just when it comes to APEC, right? You know, the world's global leaders are all going to be heading into this region. First, it's going to be, of course, G20 in Bali. You got Biden and Xi meeting on Monday. There's a lot to talk about. Obviously, Taiwan, Biden's already talking about he's not going to get to any kind of concessions or make any kind of fundamental concessions as well. And then you have, you know, who's missing, right? So I think Xi is going to APEC. Putin is not. Joe Biden is not either. But then we also have the Bloomberg New Economy Forum happening later on the week in Singapore as well.
Yeah, the Kremlin is saying that Russia is going to be represented at APEC summit by the Deputy PM, Belousov. Anyway, then we got New Economic Forum. We're going to be looking at this one as well. We've got people coming from all over the Bloomberg universe.
Yeah, well, except the three of us, because we got to hold fort. But yes, everyone that you're used to seeing from pretty much everywhere in the world. So Sherry's flying in from America. We have Heidi flying in from Australia. You have colleagues out of Europe, for example, also flying in. I think Francine is coming in. Manus, if I'm not mistaken. Eric Schatzker. One of our faves, of course, is also coming into the region here. So we will be on the ground. Of course, Stephen Engel, of course, will also be in Bangkok. I'm a bit confused, but yes, we will be covering this. Three of us from here, them from over there.
Yeah. we'll just go and have a drink somewhere while we're
Yes, that's better.
No.
All right, well, okay, just to let you know that do stay tuned for this. It's going to be interesting. A lot of analysis, a lot of insights. I'm going to carry you down to that APEC leaders meeting take place in Bangkok. There you go. Bangkok will be the destination. This is Look.
Tan. สนุกแน่ๆสนุกแน่ๆวันนี้สนุกแน่ๆใครรับเมื่อวานรวยเละใครรับเมื่อวานรวยเละบอกเลยโอ้โหแต่ละตัวซื้อบ้านในหลังเอาแล้ แล้วเอาแล้วเอาแล้ว จะขายเปิดกันไหมขายเปิดกันไหมก่อนขายเปิดกันไหมก่อนนะขายเปิดกันไหมก่อน
No one covers the world like Bloomberg.
Writings on the wall for the Bank of England. Just stop oil.
แล้ว
Spray painted the front door. Recession in Europe, UK, and possibly the US.
Brazilians are out in full force celebrating the election victory of former President Lula da Silva.
With unmatched reach and resources from more than 120 countries, the moment news breaks 24 hours a day.
เร็ว
Bloomberg, your global business authority. From the world of politics to the world of business, Balance of Power with David Weston brings you news, analysis, and insight from and about politics power players. Balance of Power, weekdays on Bloomberg.
I think that it's hard to put your head around any narrative. Let's just be honest. We've had sort of a shift in our sort of stagflation fears moment. People were talking about that all day yesterday.
ใจล้วนๆเลยครับเมื่อวานครับใจเขาไปซื้อล้วนๆเลยครับ
Welcome back. Let's talk about Twitter. And the new owner, Elon Musk, said all options are on the table, including perhaps bankruptcy.
โอ้โหเปิดคนละช่อง2ช่อง2-3 ช่อง
Sources say the key executives
อิทธิพล
resigned.
ของดาวโจนส์ล้วนๆครับ
For you, Sue Keenan has the details for us. Sue, yeah, what do we know?
Bit of a rough start, and it's
มัน
only
จริ
been
ง
2 weeks, David. Elon Musk finalized his $44 billion buyout of Twitter, as we know, then proceeded to lay off half the staff, but called some of them back. And now, this was his first hands-on meeting, all hands on deck. Those remaining employees and sources who were there tell us he said possibility if the company doesn't start generating more cash. Now, he had sent out an email the day before saying he wasn't going to sugarcoat the message, and he did not. He told workers no more perks like free food and working from home, and that they should brace themselves for 80-hour work weeks. Now, the warning comes amid a tumultuous start to Musk's role as what he calls the chief twit at Twitter.
เมื่อวานอะไรอ่ะ BJC ร่วงขนาดนี้เลยเหรอมีอะไรอ่ะอ๋อที่ว่าเจ้าสัวซื้อบิ๊กซีอะไรจะเอาบิ๊กซีเข้าตลาดนู่นนี่นั่นเนี่ย
The top remaining execs have resigned. They were involved in compliance and privacy. So that raises concerns about the company's ability to comply with regulations and oversight, which are significant. Musk also said earlier that Twitter is burning about $4 billion of cash a day. That's a significant burn, and that advertisers are backed away given the lack of clarity over who's in charge. Meanwhile, the 7 banks trying to sell the debt they used to finance this deal are finding it no takers unless there's a discount. Back to you.
โหดนะคุณหวี
Good stuff.
โอเคคุณหวี
Let's quickly look at
เข้าใจกันได้คุณหวี
we are at the moment
คุณหวีก็คือคุณหวี
an absolute tear, aren't we, guys? We're seeing just the Hang Seng here 5.5% up, and then again that is off the high of the day, and it's already down to that CPI print, and that's, I suppose, buy everything rally that we witnessed on Wall Street. It's made its way here. We're looking here at gains right across the border. We've got other markets coming on stream, chiefly Thailand, in just under 6 minutes. This has been that.
Landy home.
You will put a woman on Mars. You will be the first chief crypto officer. Because when you subscribe to Bloomberg, you won't just get news. You will get insight into limitless possibilities. Before you change the world, Bloomberg.
รายย่อยตกรถกันหมดแล้วนะใช่ไหม
continue to invest more.
ไปแล้วครับ
Testing 4-day work weeks to help, especially
ยังไง
working
ซิยังไงซิ
parents kind of juggle that balance between childcare and your work.
ยังไง
I know
ซิ
I feel
ยัง
that
ไง
all the
ซิ
time. This is really a people-first company. And even in an inflationary environment, you're going to see us continue to lead with our people.
โอ้โหบวก16อะฮะ
price wage
บวก
spiral, not
16
just
อะฮะ
here, but in the industry, in the economy?
Yes, and I think that
ยาวไปฮะ
this is
ยาวไปฮะ
something that, many
ยาวไปฮะ
leaders are focused on.
ยาวไปฮะวันนี้ยาวไปฮะ
Tell kind of how all of this lands.
I think the
ยาว
wage
ไป
price
ย่อ
spiral
มีย่อมีย่อมีขายกันมีขายกัน
less aggressive than we can be.
ยาวไปฮะ
Than many other companies have been.
In terms of raising prices?
Yes, we've taken our time. If you look at a 20-year history of pricing of this company, we've taken about 2%.
ยังไงซิยังไงซิ
We've never taken what we could. We've always taken what we should. We have to.
ไม่ลงไม่ลง
We have
อึด
been,
ไว้
and
อึ
we'll
ดไว้
continue
ไม่ล
to
ง
do
ไม่
so.
ลง
Take a little bit of a margin compression on that as we've had to, and I think that's the right thing. So that for the long term, Shake Shack continues to be what we're building, which is the next generation's burger joint.
งานนี้สนุกแน่ๆประกันนะเอาประกันลง TLI โอ้โหงบออกมาห่วยแล้วนะ ดูทรงแล้วไม่งั้นไม่ลงขนาดนี้ไทยไลฟ์อินชัวรันนะครับ ไทยประกันชีวิตปะ ลงหนักเลยไทยไลฟ์
There's that word, metaverse.
Doing well. How are you doing?
แล้วมาแล้ว
When I think about the metaverse, I think about immersive experiences that have
มาใครจะขายใครจะขายยังไง
Look at this. This is me. The metaverse is
ใครจะ
projected to
ขายก็
become
ว่า
over
มา
$1 trillion market by the end of this decade. And whether you know it or not, you'll probably be working with it in the future.
We're moving into a world where we're going to be interacting with computers.
คุณโรงพยาบาลไม่มีใครเล่นเลี้ยว
Definitely trippy.
I think the adoption curve is going to be slow.
It's weird.
A weird floaty thing right now.
Oh, look at you.
If
You
I could
have no
have
legs.
It's kind of a fun world, and we're just at the very beginning of a very long journey.
สวยงามสวยงามยาวไปยาวไปพี่ยาวไป
A multi-trillion-dollar industry. There's a lot of ground to cover.
Commodities got absolutely crushed.
We'll show you what's happening in ETFs like no one else. Bloomberg ETF IQ. Monday on Bloomberg. มีย่อมีย่อ
It's almost 2
Yeah,
a.m.
yeah.
in Singapore and Shanghai. Welcome to Bloomberg Markets Asia. I'm Haslinda Amin.
What a day. I'm Rashad Salamat in Hong Kong. Let's have a look at our top stories. We've got stocks surging, the dollar weakening, all on bets. That the Federal Reserve will moderate its interest rate hike path after seeing more benign than anticipated inflation. Chinese equities also chime in on all this, and that's despite daily COVID infections surging to their highest since April. Plus, FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried is facing an investigation by the SEC as authorities in the Bahamas freeze the company's assets. We're going to get the view of the digital financial services company Circle.
Well, it is a Friday feeling. It is a party. It is a massive rally across asset classes on the back of the CPI coming in weaker than expected. More
ดีใจกันใหญ่นะหุ้นขึ้น 20 จุดละจ้า
coming in weaker than expected.
โอ้โห ตลาดไทยเป็นไงครับ สวยงามเวลาระเบิดระเบ้อระเบ้อระเบิดระเบิดระเบ้อเลยนะฮะ
Come December, taking a look at where markets are right now.
อย่าไป
Pretty much green across the board. I can't recall the last time we saw a board like this. Now, taking a look where we are in terms of those specific benchmarks, the TAIEX up by about 3.5%. The Hang Seng rose as much as 7%, now higher by 5.5%. And take a look at HS Tech in particular, rising as much as 9.9%, just short of that 10% mark there. In the FX space, the dollar has been swinging between gains and
ยาวไปฮะ
losses
ยาวไป
on the back of the dollar falling the most in about 10 years. Some relief, some some support for Asian currencies. The Hong Kong dollar pretty stable. The Taiwan dollar up by 1.6%. The ringgit, rupiah, South Korean won also well supported. Bear in mind though, this feeling, we saw that just about 2 weeks ago. Expectations of a pivot, that didn't happen. But we'll see if those gains can continue. And in the bond space, not surprising that yields are being dumped currently. 2-year yields in New Zealand currently lower by about 20 basis points. And in the commodity space, also well supported on expectations that perhaps demand will come back. Bear in mind as well, Rish, we have that meeting between Xi Jinping and Joe Biden coming up in Asia next week. Expectations are that perhaps they will start talking and perhaps relations will be better from here.
ไม่ต้องเฝ้าแล้ว
But this is
เสีย
all
เวลา
about
เฝ้า
what's
เด้อ
going on with U.S. inflation and U.S. futures. Well, they're unmoved really, just unchanged. Perhaps all the gains that we did see have been already locked in. I mean, the Nasdaq overnight 7.3% up, 5.5% for the S&P 500. The Dow 3.7% up. These futures at the moment indicating perhaps a slight gains, but let's kick it out to what we have really in terms of what is likely to happen next. Now, that inflation data has prompted some swap traders to pair bets on future Fed Reserve hikes, suggesting the policy rate will peak at around, or just below 5% in the middle of next
ท็อป
year.
ย่อนะ เปิดแล้วย่อ
There'll be,
นะ
of course, a pause
ท็อป
before
ย่อ
they
ใครจะ
start
ซื้อ
to cut borrowing costs there. So that's
ท็อปย่อ
really
ท็อ
what
ป
we
ย่อ
have at the moment as we see these
ปันผลแล้วจะฟรีแน่นอน
prospects
ดู
of
ทรง
trade
เอาตลาด
hikes
ขึ้นอย่างนี้ฟรีแน่นอน
just diminishing. Right. We did, of course, hear, as you would expect, from a string of Fed officials. They hinting that there may be now time to start moderating the rate of future interest
จะ
rate
ไป
hikes.
ยากอะไรอะตลาดไทยอะมันไปยากอะไร มันไม่มีคนให้ลง
It may be appropriate to slow the pace of rate increases
ย่อมาย่อ
so we
มา
can
จัด
better
ไป
assess
ใคร
how
ย่อมา
financial
จัด
and
ไป
economic conditions are evolving. I also believe a slower pace should not be taken to represent easier policy.
I expect we will slow the pace of our rate hikes as we approach a sufficiently restrictive stance. But I want to be clear, a rate hike of 50 basis points would still be significant.
Stepping down is an appropriate thing to think about. It is not to be confused with adjusting the terminal rate.
A more measured approach to rate increases might be particularly useful.
All right, let's bring in perspective. Let's bring in our guest who has revised his Fed funds rate forecast for the first half of next year. Joining us from Kuala Lumpur is Silas Jha, Chief Economist and Head of Market Research at RHB Banking Group. Silas, good to have you with us. We have been here several times before. In fact, just 2 weeks ago, we were expecting that pivot. That pivot did not happen. Is it different this time round?
It's too early
จัด
to say
ไป
also
ฮะ
that
จัด
even
ไป
though
ฮะ
you're wearing that
อ้าว
big
ย่อมา
dress,
16
if I may add,
ขาย
the
ขายมา
bottom line is that look, we need
ขาย
some,
ก็บอกมา
some comedy at this hour. But the bottom line is that we've seen this movie before. This type of we've seen it in the second quarter. And essentially these type of moves that we're seeing across asset classes and across spot and derivatives market are highly unusual. So our view, we have 3 key views. We're not changing first our federal funds rate forecast, the peak, at 5 to 5.25%, although the market is now starting to price in below 5%. And cuts in the second half of the year. We have no cuts in place. That's the first key message. The second key message is that it's not clear to us that this move down in U.S. 10-year yields is sustainable, at least in terms of the extent. It is kind of playing out to what we're thinking that the average for this quarter is 3.5 to 4%, and first half of next year is 3 to 3.5%. So we're maintaining our recommendation, which we've had on for some time, to essentially scale in, maybe not all in, to add duration in terms of local currency bonds in the U.S. and Southeast Asia. And in foreign exchange, this kind of decline in the dollar, particularly the DXY index and appreciation of Asian currencies against the dollar, is short-lived. So we would be thinking of buying on dips in terms of continue to be long dollar Asia.
As you said, you raised your general rate to 5.25%. Risks to the upside or downside?
Right now, I would think, given what has happened today and the way that the Fed is starting to orate, I mean, it's quite odd that on the back of one month number, the tune is changing. Let's see how the numbers progress. But the bottom line is right now we're okay with our forecast in terms of neutral, 5 to 5.25%. I think that's where we are.
So, I mean, to that point, it's almost as though equity markets, bond markets are suggesting that the inflation genie has been put back into the lamp.
I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. That's the first takeaway. That's absolutely correct, Rashad. And not only that, is that potentially what the market seems to be thinking about is when you look at the rates, as you illustrated on your screen right now in swaps, that we are going to be headed for a significant decline in inflationary pressures in the U.S. So it's like off to the races, blue skies. Seems a little bit. I think we would like to be conservative. We're not saying the market's completely wrong, but I think a little bit too optimistic for our taste. And we think that the more durable loss in momentum of U.S. inflation out here in Southeast Asia is towards the year-end, early part of next year. So a little bit too optimistic from our perspective.
But if we get a weaker dollar, of course, that takes some of the inflationary pressures away, does it not? But I'm just looking at also the euphoria we're seeing, a bit more on that. Does this mean we bring forward a Santa Claus rally, in other words?
So we've had that Santa Claus rally in place for, like a month or so. It has definitely come in earlier than we had anticipated. We were thinking it was going to be post-U.S. Thanksgiving into December or part of next year. Now that that's happened, I would say for, the next 2 to 3 weeks, we would kind of step back, smell the coffee, as one says, and think a little bit of near-term softness is coming. This sort of rallies we're seeing are a little bit too optimistic, I think. But we are still in the camp that post-U.S. Thanksgiving into December, early part of next year, that we could get that so-called Santa Claus rally. Tactical in nature, more medium to long term, just don't know yet.
Saleh, 60-40 portfolio up about 3.5%. Is it back in vogue?
I think it's coming back, and that's kind of what we're seeing in the marketplace, right? That seems to where people are moving. Market sentiment is moving quite quickly. So I would say yes, it's in there.
So of course, you look at what's happening there with the interest rate picture. But I mean, what does the first quarter of next year look like in your view?
The first quarter of next year for us is a situation where we think that in terms of U.S. 10-year yields, we have this forecast in place for some time, is at 3.5% in the first half of next year. In terms of a foreign exchange, we still think that the dollar remains elevated against Asian currencies, and the sentiment towards equity markets towards the first half of next year will be probably kind of a positive, I would say. This is substantiated by our macro view, the top-down view that we've had in place also for quite some time. I guess since June, controversial, but I think the market's coming around to that, is that we are expecting a soft landing in the U.S., no recession in the U.S. in our base case, just a slowing down to trend, and that inflation will eventually come down, but it will remain sticky in the foreseeable future. Those would be our key takeaways heading into next year.
Jailesh, always a pleasure. Have a fantastic weekend. Jailesh Shah from RHB Banking Group there. Right. Of course, the U.S. economy is one thing.
น่าจะเป็นซื้อคืนของไอ้พวกช็อตทั้งหลายนะช็อตไม่ดูตามาตาเรือ ก็เลยเจ็บหนักกันนะคำพูดประมาณว่าไม่มาตามนัดอะไรเงี้ยไม่มาตามนัดเรียกว่าไม่มาตามนัดสผ.ครับเปิด 191.5 ล่วงครับใครไม่ขายเจ๊งยับสผ.แม่งนิสัยรู้เลยอ่ะใครเล่นสผ.นี่น่าสงสารอ่ะชีวิตแม่งโอ้ โอ้ยสบกดตลาดประมาณความดันขึ้นเลยนะใครซื้อใครขายเนี่ยผมร่วงหัวงอกกันหมดลุกไปเยี่ยวยังไม่ได้เลยสบไอ้ชี้ขอโทษ My God
On Wednesday, Biden vowed to make no fundamental concessions to Xi in what will be their first face-to-face talk since he became president.
เอาไงสิกดไหมกดลงมาไหม
Says the U.S. will brief Taiwan on the outcome of the meeting.
กดไหมกดตลาดไหม
China's daily COVID infections have exceeded 10,000 for the first time since April, with Beijing's cases at the highest level in more than a year. The rise comes as the country's top leaders reinforce the need to stick with their COVID-zero approach, while urging officials to be more targeted with restrictions to avoid damage to the economy. Global News 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Vonnie Quinn. This is Bloomberg. How's Linda?
Vonnie still ahead this hour. FTX is hurtling toward bankruptcy as its crisis snowballs. We'll get analysis from Circle's Chief Strategy Officer and Head of Global Policy, Dante Dispari, a little later.
But first, China's Singles Day sales expected to be muted this time around with COVID restrictions and a slowing economy crimping consumer demand. We'll get the take of Lazada Group's Chief Business Officer. That's next. This is the move.
Landy home. Together we have the opportunity to build a more sustainable and inclusive future. At the Bloomberg New Economy Forum, we help make this possibility a reality by cultivating new connections among global leaders that transcend geographies, industries, and ideologies. Because when global leaders work together, the outcomes benefit all of us. Learn more at BloombergNewEconomy.com.
You're so intimately linked to the future of the UK. What are you seeing when you go to branches and in the country?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of anxiety at the moment. I think the recovery from the pandemic has been and is continuing to be very strong. So I think we're seeing the economy recover. But with rising interest rates, with inflation, those are things that peoples and families and businesses haven't had to deal with for 10 years. So a lot of business owners today haven't had to operate in that environment. So it's causing quite a lot of anxiety, which means for us, because we're up and down the country in branches and offices, we can spend a lot of time talking to businesses and helping them plan and deal with it. But it is very different, and it's not something people have had to operate in for a long time.
Season is here.
Backdrop is not looking too good. I'm seeing the earnings bar being lower.
Bloomberg breaks the numbers first.
Profit and sales volumes.
Bigger than expected, stronger than expected.
Certainly one to watch here.
With exclusive expert analysis.
Plenty of anxiety not far under the surface. There could be much more significant upside.
How are you adjusting to this inflation environment?
Are there any market bets that you could make there? At what point is this actually a screaming buy?
Bloomberg Television and Radio.
Oh
the
my
fastest numbers
God.
and analysis you trust.
There we go. Absolute tear to the upside here. Chinese equities not being left out of the party. We've got tech definitely getting a boost and rocket under it after, of course, we saw the Nasdaq up over 7%. Hang Seng leading the charge for the big benchmarks, 5.4% to the upside. Now, we also have something called Singles Day taking place. It is the 11th of November, of course, 11/11, and it's expecting a more subdued e-commerce party, if you will, for China, with key players shifting focus to customer loyalty in place of year-on-year growth. But China's biggest retail sales event of the year has become a bankable win also for Southeast Asian retailers. The region's digital economy expected to grow some 20% this year, and by 2025 expected to hit $330 billion. Joining us now exclusively is James Chang. James is the Chief Business Officer at Lazada Group. How's Singles Day going so
ไปเที่ยว
far for
ดี
you,
กว่า
James?
โอ้ยขี้เกียจแล้วว่าครับ
Yeah, it's been,
เดี๋ยววันนี้ไม่มีอะไรนะ
there are many changes
งั้น
in
เลิก
consumers'
ไลฟ์ก่อนนะ
buying behavior. But
ไม่มี